It was 3:42 a.m., and the hallway on the 8th floor of that rundown hotel in downtown Chicago was dead silent except for the faint buzz of the flickering fluorescent lights and the musty smell of old carpet that clung to everything. My name's Ethan Reed. I'm 27, and I've been scraping by as a construction worker. But with the winter freeze shutting down most sites, I'd taken on some odd jobs to make ends meet. Tonight, that meant pulling a voluntary night watch shift for the hotel's renovation project, helping the crew keep an eye on tools and materials while they patched up this aging beast of a building. My back was killing me from hauling crates all evening, and my hands still reeked of old cement and cold metal. All I wanted was to crash on my bed and get a few hours of shut-eye before the next grind started. I fumbled for my keycard, swiped it against the lock of room 847, the temporary perk they gave me for the gig, and heard the familiar click. The door swung open with a creak, and I stepped halfway in, already shrugging off my jacket. But then I froze. Right there on the single bed pushed up against the window was someone. Not my duffel bag or a forgotten coat. A person. A woman. Her blonde hair was splayed messily across the pillow, like she'd collapsed without bothering to tie it back. She was wearing a wrinkled office blouse, buttons done up crookedly, and one high heel had tumbled to the floor beside the bed. She was out cold, breathing deeply, the kind of sleep that comes from total exhaustion. My heart slammed against my ribs like a jackhammer. What the hell? Was this a break-in, some kind of mix-up, or worse? Should I call the cops? My mind raced through every bad scenario, wrong rooms, squatters, or God forbid, something criminal. I started to back out, hand reaching for my phone, when she stirred. Her eyes snapped open, wide and panicked. She clutched the bedsheet like it was a lifeline, sitting up halfway in one jerky motion. We'd locked eyes, me, this tall guy in a dusty work jacket looming in the doorway, and for a few seconds that felt like an eternity, neither of us moved. The room was thick with tension, the only sound the distant hum of the city outside. Then, in a hoarse voice rough from sleep, she whispered, "I'm sorry. I thought this was my room. The front desk, they must have given me the wrong keycard." No screams, no hysterics. Just raw confusion hanging between us, two strangers thrown into the most awkward situation imaginable. I could see the fear flicker in her eyes, but she didn't bolt or yell for help. And me? I stood there, pulse racing, trying to process it all. This wasn't some movie plot. This was real, and I had no idea what to do next. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. "It's okay," I said slowly, lowering my hands to show I wasn't a threat. "As long as you're not planning to steal my bed." It was a lame attempt at a joke, but it slipped out anyway. Anything to cut the edge off the moment. She blinked, surprised, and then let out a small, tired laugh. It wasn't full of joy, more like exhaustion breaking through. The sound eased something in me, made her seem less like an intruder and more like, well, just a person who'd had a rough night. She introduced herself as Sophia Lang, 43, a senior marketing consultant who'd just flown in from Denver for a conference. She'd been running on fumes after back-to-back meetings, grabbed her keycard from the desk without double-checking, and crashed the second she hit the bed. "I didn't even notice the room number," she admitted, rubbing her eyes. "God, this is mortifying." I could tell she was holding it together, but there was a vulnerability there, like she'd been pushed to her limit long before this mix-up. I nodded, still standing awkwardly by the door. Part of me wanted to call the front desk right then, sort it out, and send her on her way. But it was the middle of the night, and the lobby was probably a ghost town. Plus, she looked like she'd been through hell. Dark circles under her eyes, shoulders slumped. "Look, it's late," I said. "You can stay if you need to crash a bit longer. I'll just figure something out." I glanced around the cramped room. One bed, a pull-out sofa that looked like it hadn't been used in years, and not much else. No way was I kicking her out into the hall at this hour. She hesitated, scanning me like she was deciding if I was safe. "Are you sure? I don't want to impose." Her voice was softer now, the panic fading. I shrugged. "Yeah, no big deal. I've slept on worse." I pulled the spare blanket from the closet and dragged the sofa bed out, keeping a respectful distance. As I settled in, my mind wouldn't shut off. Who was this woman? She didn't fit the usual hotel crowd, too put together, even in her disheveled state. And why did she look so lost? Like she'd dropped everything in her life right there on that bed. We didn't talk much after that. She thanked me again, curled back under the covers, and the room went quiet. But sleep didn't come easy for me. The city lights filtered through the thin curtains, casting shadows on the walls, and I kept stealing glances at her silhouette. There was something about her, poised even in chaos, that stuck with me. Little did I know this random screw-up with a keycard was about to flip my whole world upside down. The next few minutes stretched on, but eventually her breathing evened out again. I lay there on the lumpy sofa, staring at the ceiling, replaying the whole thing. How does something like this even happen? A high-powered consultant from out of town ends up in a construction guy's temporary crash pad? It felt like fate's bad joke. But as the adrenaline wore off, a weird calm settled in. She wasn't a threat. She was just tired, like me. And in that quiet, shared space, I felt a spark of something I couldn't name yet. Curiosity, maybe, or the start of seeing someone for who they really were. By the time dawn started creeping in, I was still wide awake, thinking about how one wrong swipe could change everything. Sophia stirred again around 6 a.m., sitting up slowly and running a hand through her tangled hair. "I should go sort this out with the desk," she said, her voice clearer now. But she didn't move right away. Instead, she looked at me, really looked, and smiled faintly. "Thanks for not freaking out. Most guys would have." I sat up, rubbing my neck from the uncomfortable sofa. Most guys haven't spent nights on construction sites. This is luxury compared to that. She chuckled softly, and for the first time, the tension fully broke. We chatted a bit while she gathered her things, about the crappy hotel coffee machine, the Chicago winter that never ends. It was small talk, but it felt natural, like we weren't total strangers anymore. As she headed for the door, keycard in hand, the wrong one, apparently, she paused. "Ethan, right? If you're around later, maybe I owe you a real coffee, not this sludge." I nodded, surprised. "Yeah, sure, room 847, yours or mine." We both laughed, and she was gone. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone in the room that suddenly felt emptier. What just happened? A night of chaos, and now an invitation? I shook my head, but a grin tugged at my lips. Little did I know, that mix-up was the beginning of something way bigger than a wrong room. The morning light in Chicago was always this dull, grayish haze filtering through the cheap hotel curtains, like the city itself was too tired to fully wake up. I stirred around 6:30, my body clock still wired from years on construction sites where dawn meant go time. The sofa bed had done a number on my back, lumpy as hell, but it was better than nothing. I glanced over at the main bed, half expecting last night to have been some weird dream. But there she was, Sophia, still curled up under the covers, her breathing steady and soft. She looked more peaceful now, the panic from our midnight standoff gone, replaced by the quiet exhaustion of someone who'd been running on empty for too long. I got up quietly, not wanting to wake her, and headed to the tiny kitchenette corner. The hotel's coffee maker was a relic, rusted at the edges, sputtering like it was on its last leg, but I managed to brew a pot anyway. The bitter aroma filled the room, cutting through the stale air. I poured 2 cups, black, no frills, and set one on the nightstand beside her. That's when she shifted, her eyes fluttering open. She sat up slowly, blinking against the light, her blonde hair still a tangled mess from the night before. For a second, she looked disoriented, like she was piecing together where she was, and who I was. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice low. "You okay?" I handed her the cup, and she took it with both hands as if the warmth was grounding her. She nodded, sipping tentatively. "Yeah, I think so. Thank you, really." Her voice was clearer now, less raspy, but there was still that edge of vulnerability. She glanced around the room, probably remembering the chaos of our introduction. "I should have gone down to the desk last night, but I was just so wiped out." "No worries," I replied, pulling up the desk chair and sitting across from her. "Front desk probably wasn't staffed anyway. Besides, you looked like you needed the rest." I grabbed my own cup and took a sip. Bitter as expected, but it hit the spot. We sat there in a semi-awkward silence for a minute, the kind that follows a strange night. To break it, I rummaged through the mini fridge and pulled out some stale toast from the complimentary basket. Breakfast of champions, I joked, toasting a couple slices in the ancient toaster. Not much, but it'll do. She smiled faintly, accepting a piece when I handed it over. Better than nothing, I haven't eaten since the plane. We munched in quiet for a bit, the crunch of toast the only sound. But then, almost naturally, the conversation started to flow. Maybe it was the caffeine kicking in, or maybe it was just two people stuck in the aftermath of an absurd situation, but she opened up first. You know, she said, staring into her cup, last night wasn't just about the wrong keycard. I've been running ragged for weeks, months really. I'm Sophia Lang, by the way, senior marketing consultant. Flew in from Denver for a conference that's sucking the life out of me. She paused, her fingers tracing the rim of the mug. I used to run my own firm, actually. CEO of a mid-sized marketing agency. Built it from scratch, poured everything into it. But then, things fell apart. I leaned back, listening without interrupting. She had this way of speaking, direct but with a weight behind her words, that pulled you in. What happened? I asked gently, not pushing, just curious. She sighed, setting her cup down. A lawsuit. Internal betrayal from a partner I trusted like family. Accusations flew. Embezzlement? Mismanagement? It wasn't true, but the damage was done. Clients bailed, the board turned on me. I fought it for a year, but in the end I stepped down, walked away with my reputation in tatters. Now I'm just consulting, trying to rebuild, but I don't know, it's like I built all these things, campaigns, teams, empires, and suddenly, no one believes in me anymore, not even me. Her words hung in the air, raw and honest. I could see the toll it had taken. The faint lines around her eyes, the way her shoulders slumped just a fraction. It wasn't pity I felt. It was respect. She'd been through the ringer and was still here, sipping crappy coffee in a stranger's room. That sounds brutal, I said. I've never dealt with anything like that. Suits and boardrooms aren't my world. But I get the rebuilding part. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine with genuine interest. Tell me about you then. Ethan, right? What brings a guy like you to a place like this? I chuckled, rubbing the back of my neck. Yeah, Ethan Reed. 27, born and raised in a small town in Illinois. Cornfields, pickup trucks, the whole deal. My mom passed a few years back from cancer, left me with a pile of bills and not much else. Dad was never in the picture. So I packed up, headed to Chicago with whatever I could fit in my truck, and started as a laborer on construction sites. It's hard work, backbreaking some days, but it's honest. Right now, with winter shutting down outdoor jobs, I'm helping with this hotel reno. Watching tools at night, fixing what I can. This room, it's my temp setup while I pitch in. No glamour, but it keeps the lights on. She nodded slowly, absorbing it. Sounds like you're building from the ground up too, literally. There was a pause and she set her toast aside. You know, in my old life, I surrounded myself with people, executives, clients, teams, but none of them ever really saw me, not like this, not the mess I am right now. Her voice cracked just a bit, but she held it together. I didn't know what to say at first. Me? A construction guy seeing through to someone like her? But it felt true. Well, I said quietly, maybe that's because I'm not looking for the CEO version, just the person who ended up in the wrong bed. She laughed again, lighter this time, and for a moment the room felt less like a hotel and more like a confessional. We talked a while longer about the cold Chicago winters, her endless flights, my calloused hands from swinging hammers. It wasn't deep philosophy, but it was real. And as the morning wore on, I felt something shift inside me. This woman, Sophia, wasn't just a random intruder anymore. She was someone who'd let her guard down, shared a piece of her broken world. And in return, I'd shared mine. By the time she finished her coffee and started gathering her things to head to the front desk, I realized I didn't want the conversation to end. Hey, I said as she reached the door. If you're still around after your conference, that coffee you mentioned, make it a real one. She turned, smiling softly. I'd like that, Ethan. And just like that, she was gone, leaving me with an empty room and a full mind. What the hell had just happened? A night of chaos turning into connection? I didn't know yet, but it felt like the start of something solid, built on nothing but honesty. The days after that morning coffee blurred into a weird mix of normalcy and something unspoken hanging in the air. Sophia and I exchanged numbers before she left for her conference sessions, and we grabbed that real coffee later that afternoon in the hotel lobby. Nothing fancy, just two people chatting over decent brews instead of the sludge from the room. It felt easy, like we'd skipped the awkward small talk phase. She laughed at my stories about botched construction jobs, and I listened as she vented more about her fallout from the agency. By the end, it didn't feel like we were strangers anymore. But Chicago being Chicago, word travels fast in a place like this hotel, especially with staff and conference attendees milling around. It started small. I overheard a couple of the renovation crew guys chuckling in the break room the next day. "Hey, Reed, heard you had company last night. Older lady crash your pad?" one of them said, smirking over his thermos. I played it off with a shrug. Keycard mix-up, nothing more. But the way they raised their eyebrows told me the story had already twisted. By evening, it had escalated. Whispers in the hallways. That marketing exec slept in the construction kids' room. What a scandal. Some laughed it off as a funny mishap, but others laced it with sarcasm. Guess age doesn't matter when you're desperate for a bed. I brushed it aside at first. Construction sites are full of gossip, and I've dealt with worse. But it gnawed at me. Was this how people saw it? Me, the young laborer, and her, the older woman? The age gap hadn't even crossed my mind until then, but now it felt like a spotlight. Sophia must have caught wind of it too. She texted me the next morning. "Conference is wrapping up early. Busy day?" We met for a quick lunch in a nearby diner, away from the hotel eyes. But something was off. She was quieter, her smiles shorter. Midway through, she set her fork down and sighed. "I heard the rumors," she admitted, not meeting my gaze. "In the conference halls, people talking about the woman who ended up in the wrong room with the young guy. It's stupid, but it stings." I nodded, feeling a knot in my stomach. "Yeah, the crew gave me crap about it too, but it's not like anything happened. It was just a mistake." She looked up then, her eyes tired. "I know, but in my world, conferences, networking, reputation is everything. I've already lost so much from that lawsuit. The last thing I need is people assuming—" She trailed off, but I got it. Assuming what? That she was desperate? That I was some opportunist? The words hung unsaid, but they created a wall. We finished lunch politely, but the easy flow from before was gone. She hugged me goodbye, quick, platonic, and said she'd text later. But the messages slowed. A day passed with just a "how's the Reno going" hunt from her, and my reply felt forced. Then the hotel security pulled me aside during my shift. The guy was stern, clipboard in hand. "Reed, we heard about the unauthorized guest in your room. Policy's clear, no strangers allowed. Could get you kicked off the gig." I explained the key card error, how it was the desk's fault, but he just shook his head. "Doesn't matter, keep it professional." I walked away fuming, not at him, but at how one innocent night had snowballed into this. Professional? We hadn't done anything wrong. But doubt crept in. What was I even doing? She was 43, established, from a world of boardrooms and flights. Me? 27, calluses and coffee stains. The gap felt wider now, amplified by the whispers. I didn't text her for a couple days, telling myself it was better to let it fade. Give her space. Give myself space. But the silence ate at me. I replayed our talks, the way she'd opened up about her losses, how I'd shared about my mom. It wasn't nothing. On her last night at the hotel, I slipped a note under her door. She'd mentioned switching rooms after the mix-up. It was simple. "I know a redevelopment site on the outskirts. Old neighborhood getting a facelift. If you want to see something being built up instead of torn down, hit me up." No pressure. I included my number again, just in case. Part of me figured she'd ignore it. Too risky, too weird after the rumors. Why would she want to hang out with the construction kid? But 2 days later, as I was wrapping up a shift at the site, a rundown block of row houses being gutted and rebuilt with recycled materials, my phone buzzed. It was her. "I'm in town one more day. Send the address?" My heart jumped. I texted it over, half expecting her to bail. But an hour later, there she was, pulling up in a rental car, bundled in a coat against the biting wind. She stepped out, scanning the chaos of scaffolding and debris, and our eyes met. No avoidance this time, just a small, real smile. "Show me around?" she asked. And just like that, the distance started to crack. The wind whipped through the outskirts of Chicago like it was trying to chase away the last remnants of winter, carrying that sharp, biting chill that made your bones ache if you stood still too long. The redevelopment site was a chaotic symphony of progress: half-demolished row houses with exposed beams, piles of recycled bricks and lumber stacked under tarps, the metallic tang of sawdust and rust hanging in the air. I led Sophia through it all, stepping carefully over extension cords and debris, pointing out the spots where new foundations were being poured. She followed quietly at first, her coat pulled tight around her, eyes scanning the transformation like she was seeing it through a lens I couldn't quite grasp. We stopped at one of the partially rebuilt structures, a skeleton of a home with fresh framing rising from the old concrete slab. She eased down onto a makeshift step of stacked cinder blocks, brushing off some dust, and I sat beside her, close enough to talk but not crowding. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows that stretched across the site like fingers reaching for something lost. "You believe this will hold up?" she asked, nodding toward the unfinished wall in front of us, her voice carrying that mix of curiosity and doubt. I leaned back, resting my elbows on my knees, feeling the rough texture of the blocks through my jeans. "Long enough for someone to call it home," I said. "These old neighborhoods have seen a lot. Families come and go, storms hit hard. But we use what's salvageable, reinforce the weak spots. It's not about making it perfect. It's about making it last." She stared at the wall for a long moment, her fingers tracing idle patterns in the dirt. Then, without warning, she started talking. Not the guarded snippets from before, but real, unfiltered truth. "I built an empire once," she said, her tone steady but laced with something raw. "Started from a tiny office in Denver, hustling for clients, pulling all-nighters to land deals. Grew it to a team of 50, multi-million contracts. But in the end, no one remembered where I sat in those meetings. I had boardrooms full of people nodding at my ideas, but when the betrayal hit, the lawsuit, the backstabbing, they scattered. I fought, Ethan. God, I fought. But it stripped me bare. Now, I chase freelance gigs, smile through conferences, but inside, it's like I'm still that empty office, waiting for someone to fill it." I listened, the weight of her words settling over me like the site's dust. The crew had packed up for the day, leaving us in this quiet bubble amid the half-built chaos. "Sounds like you gave everything to it," I said softly. "But maybe that's the problem, giving to things that don't give back." She turned to me, her eyes searching mine. "And you? Building houses for strangers? Doesn't that feel temporary?" I shrugged. "It is. But every nail I drive, every beam I set, it's solid. I don't have contracts or corner offices, Sophia. Hell, I don't even have a steady gig right now. But if you need a cup of tea, I can brew that." It was a simple thing, echoing our morning coffee, but it hung there between us, meaning more than the words. That's when it happened. Her composure cracked, not in a dramatic sob, but in silent tears that slipped down her cheeks, one after another. She didn't wipe them away at first, just let them fall, her shoulders trembling slightly. "No one's ever seen me like this," she whispered. "Not since the fallout. I've been so busy proving I'm still worth something that I forgot what it feels like to just be." I didn't move closer right away, respecting the space she needed. But my chest tightened, seeing her like that, strong, capable Sophia unraveling in the fading light. "You don't have to prove anything here," I said. "Not to me. Your world, boardrooms, deals, it's impressive as hell. Mine, it's dirt and hammers. But maybe that's why this works. I see the person behind the title, the one who's tired of holding it all together." She finally looked at me fully, tears glistening. "And I see you, Ethan. Not just the guy who let a stranger crash in his room, someone steady, real. In my life, everything's been about climbing, achieving. But with you, it's like I can breathe." We sat there as the sun dipped lower, the site's noises fading to the occasional creak of settling wood. I reached out then, tentatively placing my hand over hers, rough calluses against her smooth skin. She didn't pull away. Instead, she squeezed back, and in that touch, something healed. Not everything, not instantly, but a piece. We talked more as dusk settled. About her fears of starting over at 43, my quiet grief over losing my mom and scraping by alone. The differences were stark. Her high-stakes losses versus my blue-collar struggles. But they bridged us, showing how we'd both been rebuilding in our own ways. "We're from different worlds," she said eventually, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "But maybe that's what makes this possible." I nodded. "Yeah, no expectations, just seeing each other." As we stood to leave, the cold air nipping at us, I felt lighter. The rumors, the doubts, they didn't matter here. This was us confronting the mess, acknowledging the gaps, and starting to fill them. Little by little, like laying bricks in a wall that might just hold. 2 months slipped by in that quiet, unassuming way time does when you're not watching it too closely. The redevelopment site had transformed from a skeleton of half-torn buildings into something real, a small community center at the heart of the old neighborhood. I'd poured sweat into it alongside a ragtag group of volunteers, framing walls, laying tile, wiring lights that would flicker to life for the first time during the ribbon cutting. It wasn't glamorous, just functional space for after-school programs, senior meetups, maybe a few town halls. But on opening day, under a rare patch of blue Chicago sky, it felt like a win. Folks from the block showed up, kids running around, old-timers nodding approval, and I stood back, arms crossed, watching it all unfold. Sophia had been there from the shadows, quietly sponsoring materials without slapping her name on a plaque. "I want to try living without proving anything anymore," she'd said when I asked why. No fanfare, no speeches. Just her way of giving back, piecing together something solid after her own world had crumbled. She showed up that afternoon in jeans and a simple sweater, blending into the crowd like she belonged. We didn't stand too close, no hand-holding or whispers that might draw eyes, but our glances met across the room, a silent acknowledgement that this place, in some small way, was ours too. Mornings became our ritual after that. I'd head to the site early before the crew arrived, hammering away at new foundations for the next phase, expanding into a playground or maybe a garden. The air would be crisp, laced with the scent of fresh-cut wood and damp earth. Sophia started dropping by, her rental car swapped for a beat-up loaner, now that she'd extended her stay in the city for consulting gigs. She'd perch on a stack of lumber, wrapped in a blanket against the chill, sipping the coffee I'd brew on a portable stove. It wasn't the fancy stuff from her old life, just strong, black, and mismatched mugs, but she'd hold it like it was gold. "This beats boardroom espresso," she'd say with a half-smile, and I'd grunt in agreement, wiping sweat from my brow. We didn't live together, didn't make it official or parade around town. No grand promises or rings exchanged over candlelit dinners. Our worlds still orbited separately, her chasing leads in sleek downtown offices, me grinding through permits and pours. But in those stolen pockets of time, we built something unspoken. One morning as the sun crested over the half-built roofs, I paused my work and looked at her. "I know your name's Sophia," I said, my voice low amid the site's quiet hum. "But I've always wanted to call you the woman who knows how to see?" She set her mug down, her eyes softening as she reached out, her fingers brushing the rough calluses on my hand. "And me, I just want someone to remember that I've been seen. Not for my age or my failures, but because I'm still here." Her touch lingered, warm against the cold tools in my grip, and in that moment, the gap between us, years, backgrounds, scars, felt irrelevant. We were just two people who'd found a way to stand steady together, no labels needed. Evenings sometimes found us walking the site's perimeter after hours, the city lights twinkling in the distance like distant promises. We'd talk about the little things, her latest pitch that actually landed, my plans to maybe start my own small crew one day. No pressure to define us, just existing in the now. The rumors from the hotel had faded, buried under new gossip, but they taught us caution. We kept it low-key, no public displays that could invite judgment. "Worlds apart," she'd tease sometimes, but somehow fitting. And I'd nod, knowing she was right. As spring thawed the ground, making way for more builds, I realized this wasn't about grand rebuilds or fairy tale endings. It was quieter. A shared coffee, a hand on a shoulder, the comfort of being truly seen. Our connection had sparked from a wrong room, a mix-up that could have ended in disaster, but instead, it redirected everything. enough to shift a life off its lonely track, and in the end, that was more than enough.